Okay, welcome back, everybody. It's good to have you tuning in. This is the fourth episode, and I'm very grateful to be here with Brady. Um, it's a real honor because Brady and we have spent a little bit of time together. I was part of his men's group, and we are both in the Byron Bay area at some point. Do you remember that, Brady?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah,
Are
it was
you
great.
still? Are
Um,
you? Oh, sorry, you go.
yeah, I'm in Bali now, but about to head back to Canada. But yeah, time in Byron Bay area was amazing, and we were kind of like out in the hinterland area, and yeah, it's great. You even had the chance to come over to my house, and we had a couple men's group sessions together. So yeah, really cool, and just thanks for having me on the pod.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thanks for being here. Um, and I'm keen to see where the vibe takes us. It's been a while since I've seen you, and I know that you've had a baby and you've become a dad. And how have you been since that time that you were in Byron? What's been coming through for you lately?
Yeah, I've been good in some ways, challenged in others, and as as we transitioned from the Western world into Bali, the more Eastern world, we had a baby in that time, and we that was on purpose, like intentionally. We wanted to get out of the Western medical system to have a baby through natural birth, and the way that the birth happened, it was my wife went into labor, and then it wasn't until 8 days later that we actually gave birth. And so, like in the Western medical system, that just never would have flown. They would have ordered for like C-section or some sort of other intervention. And my wife just was, I mean, credit to her, she's just so solid in knowing what she wants, and she wanted a natural birth, and so she held out for that, and she chose to come back to Bali, and I kind of gave that decision to her. She really had the authority in our relationship at that time in terms of like where she wanted to settle, and she chose to come back to Bali, where she's lived for quite a few years, and she feels really comfortable. She got lots of community here. I wanted to get out of the Western medical system as well, but I um, also really like the luxuries of the Western world. And if you live in the Western world, it might not even feel like luxury. It might just feel like normal life. But I'm telling you, like clean drinking water out of your tap, like not like mold, growing places, and just not getting caught behind like big trucks that are just blowing a lot of diesel in my face when I'm driving on my scooter. I'm so ready to go back to the Western world. So we're about to move back to Canada, back to the Canadian Rockies, and that's where I'm from originally. My wife's never been, so I'm really excited about the transition. I've been grateful for our time here in Bali, but also I'm just ready for a little bit more of Western life. And my kid's 9 months now, and
Mm.
he's he's a handful, but he's somehow I think he belongs in the mountains. So we're gonna transition back there.
Mm. It's cool that you speak about the mountains. One of my mentors, Stacey Haynes, she's sort of a mentor to me. I remember reading or listening to her speak about her relationship with land, and she said that when she grew up in the mountains or when she grew up in these remote places, and I'm pretty sure she said mountains, that it had a real effect on her. And I'm wondering if you feel that to be true for you, your relationship with the land you grew up in as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I grew up in the city in Toronto, and as soon as I could, got out of there and went to the mountains, and then transitioned more to the ocean on this kind of side of the planet. Places like Bali, Australia, and New Zealand, which was such a novelty for me, being a Canadian from Toronto and the city, long cold winters. uh, being on a beach and by the ocean was like it was the dream. And from what I understand, a lot of Aussies feel the opposite too. That they love the snow and spend a lot of time in Canadian Rockies, and enjoy the mountains. But one thing that I've heard said before that I thought really was true is that you go to the ocean to heal your body, go to the mountains to heal your mind, and you
Mm,
go to the desert to heal your soul. And I've found that to be true. I've spent a lot of time in mountains and a lot of time by the ocean. Not a whole lot of time in the desert, but I think I will at some point. But right
mm,
now, this next chapter of my life is just I'm ready for ease of my mind. I think becoming a parent and kind of getting older has
mm,
really just brought me wanting to be free. And I really feel that once I'm in the mountains, you just there's this sense of being small. You
mm,
probably get that a little bit by the ocean as well, but something about the mountains, they really hold me in a good way that eases my mind. So I'm looking forward to getting back there.
mm. Amazing. Yeah, I was listening to one of my teachers, Adi Ashanti. He was speaking about how over the last year or two, he took some time off because he'd been teaching for a long time and something had happened with his body. His body had started to go through a big healing process. He'd had a lot of chronic pain or chronic illness he spoke to. And after he was sort of in a process of like, um, he reached a point in that process where a lot of trauma started coming up for him. And basically, what that meant was his way of supporting himself through that was going into the mountains and to just sort of just being
Mm,
there, And he spoke about how something I like that he said. He was like, everyone has a different sort of modality. For some people, talking to a therapist might be really good. And then for other people, it's just enough to maybe go swim in the ocean, on a surfboard, maybe doing something like that could be really good. And this is sort of my take on it now. But, we all have that different sort of flavor, I think. And yeah, I hope that the mountains is stilling for you. I think there's a real presence in the mountains like that. So it's cool, man.
yeah, like they say you can't run away from your problems, and some people try to, and I think for some people it works. Sometimes like a shift in geographical location can make a big difference. If I've seen it before, and lots of guys that I work with, like in my men's groups, sometimes they're kind of like stuck in this quiet town, and there's not a lot going on. They just don't have a lot of connections or a lot of joy, really, right? And that can be pretty lonely. And we're kind of getting like closer and closer to the phone screen and further away from like actual FaceTime with another human. And so sometimes like they shift things around and they move to another place, and all of a sudden their life like shifts in a big way, and that can be huge for some people. It's just changing your geographical location. And I mean, I'm happiest when I'm hiking in the mountains, so just having that available in comparison to like where I'm living now in Bali, a lot of people feel like Bali, oh, it's such a dreamy place. And I kind of like look around my neighborhood where I am now, and it's like mostly construction zones that I'm walking through if I want to go for a walk around my neighborhood. And there's just a million new villas going up around here. And so yeah, like Bali can be beautiful, but there's also a darker side to Bali, and the island itself right now feels like it's really hurting. Just
Mm,
from I mean, to speak to it directly, it's full colonization that's happening and full westernization, and there's an erosion of the beautiful culture of Bali here. So it's just something that I want less and less a part of these days, and
mm,
looking forward to getting back to the roots and just changing up where I am.
mm. What do you think's driving that? colonization?
Mostly money, resources. Like, it's a beautiful place. You know, the island of Bali is amazing, and it's kind of similar to what happened in North America, you know, 300, 400 years ago when they found this new beautiful land, full and rich
Mm,
with resources and beauty, and you know, part of the human nature is to like take, right? To take that and to you know, the sad thing is we just don't really have the foresight to look 20, 30, 40, 50 years in the future of like what does that do to this island? What does that do to this
mm,
culture? And because I've come from Western culture and now I'm living here, I can kind of see that a little bit and I can see like where Bali's gonna go. Um, and you know, I pay a lot of attention to the real estate market here, and yeah, it's just like I have a pretty good guess of like it's going to go. There's going to be a lot of people that invest here, and then there's going to be a lot of building that happens a little bit too quickly. Infrastructure is not going to be all that great, and the appeal to living here is that, you know, it's cheap and there's lots of access to a lot of different things, but what I noticed that it's missing is really like the soul of community. And there aren't recreation centers, there aren't like places that you can kind of go to create a real sense of community, and it's a very transient place in that way. So I actually think that, you know, 10, 15, 20 years from now, all these new villas that are being built are going to actually depreciate quite a bit. And people aren't going to really want to live here. And then you'll have a
mm,
bunch of concrete poured and cliffs destroyed, but no soul, no heart, no community. So,
mm,
um, you know, my prayers that things go the other way. People start to invest in things like recreation centers, sports centers, soccer fields, things that can like bring community together, and there's less
mm,
walls and just less, you know, construction zones and kind of bigger villas. So I mean, we'll see, but it's probably something that I won't be a part of the next few years anyway.
mm. Yeah. I'm reminded of when you were speaking about, this I guess I would call it, or we could call it gentrification. It's almost like a cycle of human beings entering into a space, creating a bit of havoc with the space, and what was initially drawing people there is no longer available. And I think that's something that happens. It seems to be a pattern also. But I was looking on LinkedIn this week, and there was uh, this caption I was reading, and the caption was saying how there's a project going on, um, and in the project, what they're doing is they're planting trees, um, and in 100 years, the trees are going to be harvested to create a specific book. And I sort of it said something like that. It was something like, okay, the intention here is when we're writing this book, but we're going to write it in a really long time from now. And they said 100
Mm.
years. And it just made me think like, wow, like that's a really beautiful thing. Like I don't have any goals that exist beyond my lifetime. And I wonder what it would be like if we had goals that extended beyond, you know, the immediate future all the way up until the next generation or even generations to come. Um, yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Something that I think about more and more now that I've got a kid, and just like the direction of the world as a whole. And Um, you know, I'm a big believer that real change starts in our own families, and it can be easy to like go global really quickly with our ideas, and especially with like the use of the internet and things now. But I actually don't know if those ideas always last. So if we're thinking 100 years from now, but what I do think is really supportive is like investing in our relationships and the people in our life, in our communities. And so when I think about like raising my kid, when I think about even, my the guy who owns the little local coffee shop down the street that I go to, like these are the people that I'm investing in, even if they're not, I wouldn't directly think of them as like family or like tight friends or community, knowing that every interaction that I have, whether it's at the grocery store or the coffee shop or maybe someone that I work with, maybe even someone I don't even like all that much, knowing that all of those relationships are the ecosystem that surrounds me, and if I continue to invest in them, well, guess who's in the middle of that ecosystem, right? Like there's this give take relationship where I actually end up benefiting from that. Well, simultaneously, I think that like humans are the future, right? Like when we think about 100 years from now, um, I'm curious, like what are the humans going to be like? So, those are kind of like the investments that I think about when I think about uh, future generations. Is like how am I going to raise
Mm.
my boy? What values am I going to leave him with and teach him in terms of principles?
Mm. And how do you think about relationships at the moment? I know that that's something that you focus your work on. What does that look like to you, relationships?
Yeah, I mean, relationships are different, and ultimately it's about meeting someone and being met, and like how do we actually meet them, right? And so, I work a lot with romantic relationships and relationship dynamics for long-term couples. That's again, what I'm curious about and interested in investing in is like relationships that last. I'm not super interested in like one night stands or flings or situationship, but rather like how can we invest in our families in a good way? And I watch my parents. I always say like just to backtrack, I always say that with couples that I'm thinking about working with, like the only thing that's worse than you guys getting a divorce is staying together but being miserable, right, for the rest of your life. And I watched that with my own parents for, you know, 28 years. And um, And then we did a lot of deep work. We did a lot of therapy. I got involved. I went back, spent a lot of time with my family, and we went into some really deep processes of healing and doing family therapy. And we did that for about 3 years. And what I witnessed in that time was this family unit, like my parents, they were married for 28 years, but were never on each other's team. So they would continuously be working against each other, and it made their life and my life and my sister's life to some degree miserable. And that's just something that doesn't have to exist. Through therapy, through sitting in conversation and having really clear, conscious communication, being in a container, we were able to repattern a lot of that. And as a result, my parents are happier than ever in their marriage and in their own personal life, right? Like my dad's joined a men's group, my dad's working on sobriety, my mom's done her own therapy. My sister, like, who was totally in the role of a savior for my family. She's like branching out on her own now, getting her own place, going to university, like crushing it at her job. So she's like transitioning in a big way too. And myself, like, I've been able to witness this experience where like this relationship that's been miserable for years didn't have to be that way. And the
Mm.
shift and the change happened through conscious communication. Now, like there's kind of two levels that I work with. when I work with couples. One is like the conscious communication skills and actually being able to clearly articulate what you mean and also understand your partner. I always say that conflict happens as a result of misunderstanding. So if we can bridge the gap to understand each other, well, we can actually practice love. So I also say that love and understanding is synonymous. So that's like step one is like, how can we bridge the communication that we didn't really learn as kids growing up? Most of us didn't learn how to clearly communicate our own needs, boundaries, and desires with our intimate partner.
Mm.
So that's number one. But number two is like you can have all the conscious communication skills in the world and be like a really good communicator, but if your nervous system or your partner's nervous system is dysregulated, then you're not going to be able to even hear each other. Right? There's actually little muscles in our ears that shut down when we leave our window of tolerance that those muscles help us recognize human voices. So if that shuts down, it's like you can have all of the best conscious, clear, speaking from I, owning my own shit communication, but your partner's just not going to hear it because they're totally dysregulated, right? So that's the other side of things. Is I work on building capacity and resilience within our nervous system,
Mm.
so that we can get to the place where information can flow and ultimately love can flow.
Mm. Wow. And how do you do that with the nervous system? What does that generally look like for someone who's maybe going through conflict in a relationship and maybe they don't know what the way forward is? What would you suggest to them?
Well, my answer, as often as ever, is it depends, right? Like it
Mm.
depends on the human, it depends on the scenario, it depends on the circumstance. Ultimately, like what I do with clients is I help them get all of their needs, boundaries, and desires met. All of them. And that's something that I have witnessed is when we tick those three boxes, all of our needs, all of our boundaries, and all of our desires are met, we live a really great life. Like really great. The trouble is like, how do we bridge the gap from people understanding that that is important and how to actually get that from themselves and from their partner,
Mm.
right? So if we can tick those three boxes, pretty good life. Now, how do we get people there? Well, it depends. So some people, it's like really getting them to honor their own needs and actually even understand that they have needs. Um, and then like first step is knowing what is an actual need for them, and then second step is honoring that as
Mm.
a need, right? Like we need food, shelter, water, breath, love. Like love is a need, right? And a lot of people are deficient in that. And that shows up in different ways. So that's kind of like number one. Boundaries are really important too. So helping couples understand like where actually is my boundary, and I do a lot of somatic work with this, and getting people to really understand like the deeper level of communication that's happening is actually in the body. It's in the nervous system. It's in the posture. It's in the breath, body language, right? So there's the communication that's happening here, like we're having right now through our voices, but there's a much deeper conversation that's happening. And I really get people to understand that conversation for themselves first, and then how to integrate that with their intimate partner. And then
Mm.
thirdly, like this is the place that a lot of couples that I work with want to jump to, and the first two kind of like come in order before we get to desires, right? And so ultimately, like when I'm working with couples, I'll work with them anywhere from like 5 to 16 sessions, and all of that is building up into a ceremony where I guide them through polarity practice. It's an opportunity for them to strengthen their masculine pole and express more deeply their feminine pole. And that stuff can be really juicy, like really sexy. It creates attraction, right? And this is how we create attraction is through polarity. And there's a way to guide that in a really good way and in ceremony, but I want people to be able to show up to that ceremony with a regulated nervous system. So as a result of honoring your needs and your boundaries, you're going to end up with a really regulated nervous system and be able to show up to polarity practice and deep intimacy with your partner in a good way.
Wow. So, am I right in saying that the needs, honoring your boundaries and your desires, having that ability to really honor those things in creates a regulated nervous system, or does a regulated nervous system also inform in the other direction?
Yeah, so ultimately, like what do we do once we get to the place of a regulated nervous system? Well, like hopefully we enjoy life, right? Hopefully that's the place where we get to enjoy our desires. And you know, some people get to the place of regulated nervous system and it feels overwhelming, they self-sabotage, right? So this is
Mm,
why we need to be clear on like what do we need, right? And where are our boundaries? Where are they? Because like if our boundaries are continuously being crossed or if our needs are being met, there's no chance that our nervous system is going to be regulated. There's just no
mm,
chance, right? So that's like the internal work of understanding that for themselves and then really honoring that is kind of like the majority of the work that I'll end up doing with couples
mm,
or individuals. And um, then we get to the place of like, okay, your nervous system is at least somewhat regulated to the point of like, okay, like let's celebrate this, right? And let's now get to the point of self-worth where like not only are you honoring what you need, right? Because some people like kind of miss that or have learned to miss that and it's become a really maladaptive pattern for them in life.
mm,
Where are their boundaries? Like just having the understanding of like the difference between enmeshment
mm,
and compassion, right? Like enmeshment being this quality of like, I don't really know where boundaries start and stop. I don't really know for myself and for that other person what's theirs and what's mine. So it's like they feel pain and I instantly go into like, oh, like I feel pain too and like I just it's full codependency, right? So then like the next step would be empathy. Empathy is like, oh, like I know what's mine and I know what's yours and I can actually feel into like how painful that must be for you. Like that's empathy, right? It's like, oh, like wow, that that really must hurt. Right?
mm,
Empathy, great, cool practice. The next step, though, is the ultimate practice, which is the practice of compassion. And the practice of compassion, similar to empathy, where I know what's mine and I know where that starts and stops. I know what's yours and I know where that starts and stops. And I can feel like, wow, that must be really painful for you. Like I actually really can like empathize. I can feel that pain. But compassion goes a step further to say, and I see the strength in you to be able to make it through that.
mm,
So it's I can sit in that other person's pain. And this is why compassion is the ultimate practice because it requires us, you know, compassion actually means like to be with, come passion, passion being like suffering, right? So compassion is to be with the suffering while still holding the perfectionism of that other being and knowing that they can make it through this.
mm,
But it means like sometimes it's hard because we want to jump in, we want to save them, or we want to change them, or we want to fix them, or we want to change ourselves or fix ourselves. It's like compassion really means like sitting in that person's pain and trusting that they're going to make it through. So that's like
mm,
number two, right? It's like needs and then boundaries and understanding that concept and practice of compassion. And then thirdly, we dive into desires. And desires are like again like a self-worth piece, starting to understand that we do have desires and that those desires should be honored, right? And life gets really juicy when we start to honor those desires. And guess what? Your partner should be there for you to support your desires. Like this is the like shift that a lot of couples get is that, oh, like my partner can help me get all of those things that I want in this lifetime, which is radically different than the way that a lot of couples are living, right? A lot of couples are working against each other or feeling like
Mm,
if I have this desire, she doesn't want me to have that, right? No, 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 no. You're having a communication or a nervous system breakdown, right? So
mm,
we transform that into a breakthrough where you're on each other's team. You have a desire, great. Let's find a way to get that desire met.
mm. What would you do if let's say I had a desire, if I was in a partnership and I voiced that to them and ultimately it didn't feel right or it crossed a boundary of theirs. Do you find that there's ever that place where, unfortunately there's no overlap, there's no ability to be met in a need or a desire?
I believe that in relationship, all of our desires can be met, which is kind of radical way of thinking, right? But I believe that because I've seen it. Now, it's not always the exact formula or detail of your desire. So like a really common one is guys are like, dude, like I want to be infidel with my part. Like I want to see people outside of my relationship, And then of course the other partner, if it's not consensual or not an open relationship, that partner's like that doesn't fly around here, right? Like so the I'm not saying that your desire of like, okay, now I'm claiming that all your desires can get met in a relationship, you go outside of the relationship. No, no, no. That's not at all what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is now let's explore more deeply that desire, right? And this is where the conscious communication piece comes in and the regulated nervous system to be able to have that potentially triggering conversation. But if we can really see each other and be on each other's team and feel into like, oh, you have that desire. Tell me a little bit more about that, right? Again, love is synonymous with understanding. So if we attempt to understand our partner in that, there might be another layer to that, right? And so in the end, that desire of like infidelity may actually transition into like, actually, there's a certain quality that I'm looking for in our intimate life that I'm just not getting right now. And what I would like is for us to play this game, us to play this role, us to do this thing in the bedroom that I've been fantasizing about, but I never thought that you would do it with me. And so often these deep desires that we have that we maybe even experience shame or guilt around that we don't share with the world or we don't share with our intimate partner, like the person who's meant to be closest to us in the world, those end up becoming shadows. And those shadows oftentimes still get expressed, but in darker ways.
Mm,
So the key is to illuminate those shadows and not let them hide in the dark, but allow yourself to be seen in your shame, in your guilt, in your desire, right? Like it doesn't have to be shameful or guilty. If we can, the problem isn't that we have desires, it's that we don't fully own those desires, right? So if we can fully own them, they're not lurking around in our subconscious and then coming out in destructive ways. And more often than not, when we get to that place, and I help couples do this all the time, it's a beautiful light bulb moment. When we get to that place where we do share that desire that we sometimes even think is hideous or can't be loved,
mm,
the other partner is like, I would love to do that for you. I've actually been craving the same thing. Right? So it's like your deep, dark fantasy, secret desire, maybe your partner wants that exact same thing. But how brutal would it be if you went through your whole life feeling shame and guilt about that, and for both of you, you never got to express it. You never got to experience
mm,
it. And you thought, I'm trapped in this relationship where this desire just it doesn't get space to breathe. It'll never see the light of day. and you're just
Mm.
that's where misery happens, right? So there's a deeper layer of like authenticity that's revealed through this work. And oh man, that's just why I love it so much is because it saves marriages, right? Not
Mm.
necessarily like sometimes from divorce, often from divorce, but more often saves them from a lifetime of misery being together.
Can you hear me, man?
Yeah.
No. You can?
Yeah. Yeah, I can hear and see you clearly.
Okay, yeah. I'm back. What do you think is the role or how yeah, what do you think is the role of safety in relationships?
Such a good question. Yeah, it's everything. Like really it's everything. Like I've said, it's kind of like level one relating is like if your nervous system's not operating well, um, you're gonna be not able to hear your partner, right? Not able to um balance life in a good way. So yeah, like safety is everything in a relationship. And some people get themselves into unsafe relationships but stay in them. And I was one of those people. So
Mm.
in a past relationship, I had experienced like, I mean, not physical, but certainly emotional abuse and like behavior that was totally unacceptable. And for some reason I normalized it. Right? Like I thought there's this is normal. I actually thought I was gonna marry this woman. And the moment that I kind of had a reflection point to realize like this isn't normal, this isn't what I want, this isn't okay, this behavior is not something that I'm willing to accept. Um, there was a reclaiming of my own power in that. There was a moment of understanding that um, I don't have to put up with that, and that of course came with a ton of fear and of like what if I'm throwing away my person or what if I never find someone else? Um, you know, am I just being weak? Like all those classic considerations, and eventually like just got to the point of like really honoring myself and my own needs and boundaries, and said no, right? And went through a breakup, and it was tough because we had an apartment and a dog together, and um, more and more through that breakup, I started to realize like, wow, of course, this isn't my person. Like this, like the way that she responded was just totally inappropriate. And then, doing that work for myself was a really great um, transition in my life to meet my now partner and just realize like how great relationships can be, right? When
Mm.
we start to understand what it is and it isn't that we will tolerate in relationships. Because, I'm talking a lot about desires here, but we don't get what we want in life, in business, in relationships. We don't get what we want. We get what we tolerate. So there's a level of like self-respect that's required for us to honor um, our levels of feeling safe in relationship. And um, with that, there's there's the misunderstanding for a lot of people of what safety actually is. Like, am I actually in a safe relationship? Because our nervous system responds more to familiarity than it does, like it responds better in familiarity than it
Mm.
does in newness. So if something feels familiar, but it's actually like if feeling unsafe in relationship, if you witness that growing up, if that's the adaptation that your nervous system has made, you may stay in that relationship. Um, and it may be that you need to, transition out of that relationship. It also may be that you just need to make some shifts and changes within the relationship and really start to honor your own needs and boundaries. Um,
Mm.
so I actually do a safe relationship assessment as a free tool for any couple that wants to understand this for themselves and just get really curious about like oh, is there more for me in terms of honoring myself and my needs, boundaries, and desires?
Hmm. Yeah, amazing. Amazing. If I take a bit of a step back, I just had this thought of like, wow, isn't it crazy that for some reason this is a skill that not that many people have, And I'm just like, wow, like thank you. Thank you for being a person that helps, because I feel within myself, I have limitations. I have limitations, especially when I am close with others. I really feel like, oh, sometimes, oh, negative self-talk. Oh, I wish I could have, wish I could have had a stronger boundary. Thank God I know what a boundary is at the moment, you know, but I haven't always. And it's been that real journey of like, okay, how do I come into this sense of knowing what I want, not having enmeshment, as you call it, and being able to just being able to say no and also being able to say I love you, being able to have both of them at the same time. And I think, you know, let me know if this is right or wrong in your view, but I think that they're both needed. Like it's like we need the boundary to feel that love. And maybe vice versa or maybe not, but yeah, definitely the boundary to feel that love.
Yeah, totally. This isn't mine, but I've heard it said before, and I thought it was really good. Was boundaries exist so that I'm able to love you while still loving myself, right? So we don't
Mm,
get caught up in the enmeshment or uncertainty of like, am I loving this person in sacrifice for myself, which is how a lot of people end up living relationship. Um, I agree with that statement of like knowing my boundary and also being able to say I love you. Like it's for me, it's like just such a perfect balance. Because I think in this increasingly lonely world that we live in, people fall into kind of like one of two categories. One is understanding that um, they are not alone in this world. And then like this far end of that spectrum is like they start to like lean so heavily on others that they don't really have a solid sense of self, right? The
mm,
other side of that is someone who's like full boundaried up and like really rigid, um can't really relate to many other people because they're so boundaried up, very like lone wolf quality. Um, and so yeah, there is this like careful balance of both because we need other humans. Like that's the only way we survive as a human species is through social connection and partnership. While simultaneously like we need boundaries, right? Like we need to
mm,
have a solid sense of self and someone else because in this like incredibly like through social networks connected world, um, it can be a common pattern for people to fall into people pleasing where they're trying to please every single person, which we just know is impossible. It's impossible. You cannot please everyone. And I've tried to do it before, and it just doesn't work because you please everyone except for self. And so there's this real like ownership that it eventually needs to happen where you got to realize that you're going to disappoint some people. You're going to let some people down and that's okay. Like it's actually like a much more fulfilling way to live knowing that anyone who's had success in anything, business, relationship, or otherwise, knows that like there's gonna be some hard times and there's gonna be some relationships that fall apart. And part of that is like the sacrifice, which I used to think like you hear that a lot too, like relationships all about sacrifice. And I always had a bone
Mm,
to pick with that because that wasn't my experience of like, well, why would you have to sacrifice? Like relationships are here for, getting our needs, boundaries, and desires met. That doesn't sound like sacrifice. Sounds like it could be an awesome time. Um, and then I learned a little bit more about the word sacrifice, and what it means is to make something sacred, to give something an offering to make it sacred. And it kind of blew my whole world and transition, especially, I think there are some sacrifices that I make now as a dad, but I make them I make them sacred. And that really allows, like, it's like once I decide to make that choice, it's not a sacrifice. It doesn't feel like I'm giving something. It feels like I'm a part of something. And that's
mm,
that's a um real shift for me, is like knowing that of course I'm going to give my time, my energy to my son, of course I'm going to give it to my wife. And over the past year I've kind of realized like those two are my world, you know like, and I would do more for them than I would for other people. And keeping them safe, keeping them stable, that's my priority over anyone or anything else right now. And then we expand out from there, right? And then we have our greater community and our greater family. But even, my own family, I mentioned we did therapy for many years, and I stopped that at a certain point to give that energy back to like my central unit, and just realizing that that's where the wellspring of my life flows from.
beautiful. Amazing, dude. Yeah, I'm so glad that we got the chance to dip into a few things and um, you know, it's just if there's anything at all, I feel like there's a lot I could say, but just being reminded of some of those fundamental things is beautiful for me, just those boundaries, those needs, the desires. Yeah, so thank you. Thank you so much. And I know that you mentioned that you do a safety assessment for couples. Are there any other ways that, if there's someone out there listening who's thinking like, wow, okay, I'm feeling it, and Brady's got some good things to say, and I'd love to maybe get a little bit closer to him and his work. Is there anything you'd suggest that person could do?
Follow me on Instagram would probably be the best. I kind of like branch everything out and through that. So it's Brady.Mac on Instagram. And yeah, shoot me a message. I like to connect with people and see if I can support and help. And I help a lot of couples with this. The safe relationship assessment's a great place to start. It's completely free. And it's a great touch point into my work.
Mm, amazing. Well, cool. I'm starting to get the feeling like these should be longer. Like next time we should do a longer one or something. Just to let it
Yeah.
breathe a bit. But yeah. In any case, man, thank you. And yeah, appreciate you joining, appreciate the viewers listening in, and we will see you on the next one.
Thanks, brother.